Hey everybody, welcome back to Watch and Carry. In today's video, we have another customer mod. This particular watch we're going to be working on is the Casio DW-6900B. So I want to thank Mark for sending me this watch and actually 5 of his other Casios to do mod work for. Really appreciate the trust you have in sending me these, Mark, and looking forward to getting these made for you. So for this particular one, we have a factory negative display, which actually looks really good, especially against this gray, but I agree with the customer, a little bit hard to read. So he requested to have the negative display converted to a positive. That's where you have the gray background with the black numerals. And then he'd like to add an orange filter on top of that to kind of pick up the little orange accents that you have here around the masking and the bezel on the inside. So as always, we work on a soft silicone mat. We have a raised glass here, meaning that that bezel is raised, so I don't have to worry about that touching the mat, and so I don't have to worry about scratches. So first thing we'll do is get this strap taken off. You have 2 screws on each side, kind of where the strap meets the lugs. Okay, and then you have your traditional spring bars there at the bottom. So with these integrated bracelets, what I'd like to do is just loosen one side. So let me zoom in here. Loosen one spring bar, so you just pull inward and then simultaneously try to pry outward. And then you don't want to pry too much because you don't want to bend the plastic on the opposite spring bar. So once you get one side loose, just lift it up on top of that lug and then try to pull out forward in that direction. Don't do it this way. Got 4 screws on the case back here. And these 4 screws are a different design than the 4 that we removed previously, so we don't have to worry about mixing those up. Take off our case back. Now, as you lift up the case back, you want to go slowly. What will sometimes happen is the O-ring will actually stick, because of the oil, to the back of the case back, or in some cases, part of it will stick to this case back and part of it will stick to the watch itself. So as you lift up, if you're too fast, you can actually pull that O-ring and it will stretch it. And the O-ring has to fit within a predefined space, and it's very easy to stretch and near impossible to shrink back the size. So you want to be very careful. If you notice it clinging to your case back, just take something thin and gently scrape it off. So O-ring is not on the back of the case back. In this case, it's stuck inside of its housing, and we'll just take it off gently. Now, as I disassemble this watch, Every now and then I'm going to zoom out and you'll see my parts laid from left to right. That way you can kind of follow along if you're doing the same kind of modification. Okay, we have this gray piece here. I can take that off. Okay, now we get to the actual module itself. Now, there's no sensors on this watch, but if you're working on a different watch and just using this for reference, this video, you always want to check if there's any wire harnesses going into the module because you don't want to lift that up and rip off those connections. There's no sensors here, no wires going to the case, so now I just have to find a place where to lift and get this off. I'm just using a long toothpick here. Now let's switch to... Okay, there we go. So I'm going for the 6 o'clock position here. There we go. And there's our module. I'm immediately going to put the case back loosely on to limit the amount of dust going into the case. And here is what we're going to be working with. So now we have to disassemble this to get at the display. So again, this is a soft surface for added protection. I'm just going to put down a clean microfiber cloth here. Lay this down and look for any clips. So here on the side, you'll notice we have a clip here and several others along the perimeter. So you're going to take a thin tool and lightly twist to get those clips off. As you do this, the display will start to fade and then eventually disappear because you are separating the battery from the display. Okay. Now once you get those clips off, go very slow to lift up because sometimes springs fall out and you want to keep a track of what is coming out of where. So as I open this up, okay, there's basically 3 pieces there. You can see white, green, and black. Let's start here with the white first. Okay, nothing really loose coming off of here. We've got this circuit board here. There we go. Take note of the orientation and any landmarks for the parts that you remove. So in this case, as it's facing me, I have these 2 black squares facing me. There's your circuit board. And then this part I'm not working with because the display is on the white, so I can leave this as is, but I do want to note any things that might fall off here. So if you look here to the bottom right, there's actually a very small spring that comes up right there. Okay, so that spring can easily fall off. So I need to mark the hole that that comes off of and replace that spring. I like to just take it out because when we're moving parts around, the spring can roll off. It can be impossible to find. So I know it came out of this hole. Let me see if I can zoom in more. Okay, came off of this hole right here. So I need to mark that with a Sharpie. Okay, it's kind of hard to see black against black, but I can see it in person that there's a little Sharpie circle around that hole, so that way I know where to insert it when it comes to reassembly. And then this part we can set off to the side, and then we're just going to focus now on this piece. So if we zoom out, this is kind of how our parts look like. Okay, zooming back in here. We now need to separate the display off. I do see a couple of, let me get something with better contrast for you. There we go. Okay, I do see a gold spring here and here, so if possible, I'd like to also remove those. Okay, that one is not coming off, and that one's not coming off either. So it probably means I have to open up this back part to get at them. So I take a guitar pick here and just kind of look around and see where I can open this up. Actually, you know what? Let me see if this display can come off without having to remove anything else. No, it's not. Okay, so let me get something thinner here. I'm going to get a thinner tool real quick. Well, this one does not seem to separate. Oh, and then we have two pieces that just fell out here. So these two pieces, by the way, are going to come out of this slot and this slot. And it looks like they're the same exact size, but we'll just keep the top one on the top, bottom one on the bottom, and put it right there for my parts. Okay, now I've never worked on a display where it comes off of the front, but I have had other friends who mod that have said sometimes what you need to do in that case is just go to this plastic spring here. You see it's kind of like C-shaped right here, and kind of attached to a white clip, because you have a clip here at the top and a clip here and a clip here, and these three clips hold the display down. So because this one has this little C-shaped spring, you can kind of pry this outward and then kind of try to pop the display off of the front. So let's try it that way. Okay, we have those two springs in the back, so I want to make sure I don't touch those while putting some pressure on the back. And I'm just going to use my thumb over this microfiber cloth to kind of push away at that spring, and then from my left hand try to push up on the display and try to bring this whole thing forward. Oh, that was pretty easy. Okay, I was waiting for a sound, but looks like we got it loose from the top. And there we go. There's our display we're going to be working with. You have several other parts here on the back that on other models I've had to keep track of, but in this case, I'm just going to leave it like I found it. Springs are still on the back and just set that off to the top. So this is kind of how our parts list look. Okay, for this display, to make a negative filter or a negative display into a positive or vice versa, you have to remove the factory polarizing film. So a very simple way of explaining this is if I take this display and turn it on its side, you can see that there's several layers here. It can be hard to make out, but to simplify things, think about it as made of 3 layers. Let me use my left hand. So I've got 3 layers making up this whole thing on the right. Okay, the black layer here on the top, the display, will be represented by my left finger here. And that layer is called the polarizing film. Now, from the factory, depending on how you orient that polarizing film, whether it's 90 degrees upward or 90 degrees to the left or 90 degrees to the right, you change the display look from negative to positive or positive to negative. So what we're going to be doing in this particular mod is removing this top polarizing film completely off. There's going to be glue here on the middle layer that it was stuck to, cleaning up that glue, and then getting brand new polarizing film, turning it 90 degrees opposite of what we have now, and then reattaching it back. And that new orientation of 90 degrees is what's going to give us the positive display. And when you are going to do a colored filter mod, so this customer wants a orange filter, you can only add colored filters to a positive display because obviously they won't show over a negative black display. There's not enough light going through. So now that we know what we're going to be removing, this layer, how do we find it? It's so thin here. How do we know where to locate it? What we can sometimes do is just drag something not sharp over the top and listen for it to jump down to the next layer. And then once it jumps down, you'll feel it, and then you can start wedging that little tool in. And because we're removing this polarizing film, I don't have to worry about scratching it too much because it's going to be tossed and replaced. So what do I use to drag? So I'm going to be using a guitar pick. I'm going to drag across, wait for it to skip down, and separate this out. So let's see if you can listen for that pick skipping down to that middle layer. You hear that? That little click is it jumping from here, click down to this layer. So that's how I know where to start. Now, the glue that holds the top layer from the middle layer is quite sticky, so it's not enough to have a mechanical tool here. You need to have a little bit of chemical. And in that case, we're going to be using something called Goo Gone. So let me grab that. Okay, so here's your Goo Gone. You can buy this at almost any grocery, Walmart. Has a citrusy smell to it, and it's basically a adhesive loosener. Okay, so we are going to be working with a liquid, so we're going to put down an old. That's why it looks kind of dirty, but this has just been washed. Old microfiber cloth. Got my Goo Gone here, and then I'm going to apply a little bit of it around the perimeter just to kind of loosen that glue that's over here. That way I can get my pick inside and start wedging this out. So we'll just put it along all the sides. And then we'll wait for a few minutes, let it do its job of loosening that glue. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes here. So let's try to wedge our pick here. I'm gonna listen for that sound again. but let's work over a blue towel. I think the pink is not showing up nicely on the camera. There we go. It's a little bit better. Okay, I got my pick also soaked in Goo Gone. Okay, so we're having a hard time getting the pick in there. So next thing you can use is a blade. Now, obviously you need to be a little bit careful here. I'm going to hold my blade parallel to the display and just try to catch a little edge on that polarizing film. Okay, that's it right there. See how I created just a little opening right there? That's enough for me. Okay, while I'm doing that, by the way, I recommend you, excuse me, claw your fingers because you don't want that blade to cut you in case you slip. Now we'll switch back to the pick. And sure enough, we are now able to continue that edge that we just picked up. Now, once you have it caught, you can just rock this pick back and forth. I know there are some people that just continue to use the blade when doing this, but for obvious reasons, it's safer and actually, I think, much easier given the rounded nature of the pick to just use this. Also, less chance of breaking this polarizing film in multiple pieces. It's nice to just get it off in one piece. And there you go. So now we've removed the polarizing film, and let me show that to you. Okay, now you'll notice that if I leave it in the orientation we removed it, it's black. If I turn it 90 degrees to the left, we're positive. Another 90 degrees, negative, and to the other side, positive. So again, going from negative to positive or vice versa is really just a matter of the orientation of this polarizing film. It also does matter what side of the film you're on, because if I do it this way, sure, we have black, but if you do it this way, it's not really coming in on camera, but in person, I have some gradient colors. I can see a little bit of greens and a hint of pink there, which actually looks pretty cool, but it's not what we're going for in this mod. So the way to tell whether you're on the wrong side or the correct side is to put it over the display and rock it and look for just black or just white. If you start seeing gradient colors, you should flip it over because you're on the wrong side. So now we can remove that off, and here there is a lot of glue all attached there. So now we need to clean that up. So we're going to switch again back to the Goo Gone. I have some Q-tips here soaked with it, and I'm not going to rub right now. I'm just basically wetting this entire area with it and letting that sit for another 5 minutes, so that way it can loosen the glue and it makes the mechanical motion of getting it off, with the Q-tip a lot easier if you just wait a few minutes. So we'll check back in. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes here. Now what we do is take our Q-tip, again, wet with the Goo Gone, and holding it at an angle because we don't want to grind the root underneath the cotton into the display. We're just going to make light pressure circular motions, frequently re-wetting our Q-tip. And you'll notice that the glue starts to clump together. You can also feel where the glue is. Your Q-tip will have some resistance. The edges especially are where the glue tends to be the hardest to remove, so you'll want to concentrate there. Now, once we get enough of these clumps of glue together, I like to push them to one side, and then we'll take our clean microfiber cloth and then just rub in one direction, trying to wipe that glue off. And I can already tell that this is going to be one of the easier displays to work on in terms of getting the glue off. The reason is that sound you're hearing, that squeaky sound, that means that you're already below the glue, or not below, that already means you've already removed the glue from that section, and you're basically just rubbing the cloth against the bare, clean display, which is what you want. At the end, no matter where you rub this cloth, it should have that squeaky sound because that'll tell you that the glue has been removed. But usually that takes, at least 5 or 10 minutes of this process to get that sound. In this case, the glue seems to be coming off much easier. I'm going to use a different part of the cloth to wipe away. Okay, once you think it's pretty clean, you can do is have some bright light above you or a little flashlight to get a brighter view, and then you want to rotate the display underneath that light because the glue will refract that light differently if it's still there. So you see how it's pretty clean here, and then all of a sudden right here there's a little bit of glue. So again, it looks like the glue's on the edges there. I have a little bit here by my right thumb. So we'll repeat this process again, focusing on those areas. Again, if you're working on a different model watch, this can take a long time. Some of the world times, the AE 1200 and 1300s, can take about 10 to 15 minutes of this to get it completely clean. But that's what you want to do. You don't want to leave any glue there because it will make for a cleaner look when you reassemble everything. Okay, I'm going to rotate my towel. Okay, I see a little bit more up here. You'll notice here that I'm holding this display along the edges just to limit or prevent my fingerprints from going to the actual display. I know there's some commenters that have said, why don't you wear gloves? And you know what? For some people who wear gloves, that's fine. In my experience, it's not really necessary. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but the customers that I've done mods for haven't ever complained about having fingerprints on their display. And the reason is that the gloves tend to be a little bit hard to get that extra tactile feel and grip. A lot of times when using the Goo Gone, it gets slippery and then I drop the display. So for me, as long as I'm just conscious about, number one, limiting how much I'm touching the display. Number two, making sure that at the end I use a clean microfiber cloth to take off any possible fingerprints that might be there. I think that's enough. But to each modder their own. And it's a fair point to bring up. Okay, so I think I've gotten it completely off. Let me do one more rotation of the towel. And dry this off. Bring in a new cloth here. And let's rotate this. Okay, and that looks nice and clean as far as I can tell. Okay, so now that we have that completely clean, we're going to just wipe the back here. Okay, just make sure we don't have any moisture and set that display off to the side. Switch to a clean towel, and you can put away your Goo Gone, so you're not going to need that anymore. The Goo Gone can be a little bit hard to get off, so good idea at this point to wash your hands. Okay, so here are all our parts here, left to right. At this point, this may look like a positive display, but it is not. There is no polarizing film on top of this, so we do need to put one in, because if we were to reconnect everything, nothing except what's already showing will show up. No time, no date, no nothing. So we need to cut a film that will cover this. And you have two ways of doing this. If you're using an adhesive film, meaning it's like a sticker, one side is not sticky, the other side is, you want to just cut it usually to the shape of your display, basically the exact same shape of the polarizing film that we removed. I don't use adhesive-backed polarizing film. I use non-adhesive. So what I'm going to do is actually cut it a little bit larger and cut it to the shape of the inside of the case. So I'm actually going to try to cut it to this size over here. And the reason I do that is it just makes it a little bit easier, and it gives me some extra space here on the top that is hidden from view that I can put some double-sided sticky tape and stick that polarizing film to it. So let's get the film right now. This is your polarizing film. This particular one looks wrinkled, but it is not. This is double-sided, so you have the film in the middle, protective layer on one side, protective layer on the other. None of the sides is adhesive. They're just protective layers. So that's the cause for those air bubble streaks that you see. So the first thing we need to do is identify the correct side of our film to be on. So we talked about this. Put your film over it. If you see only black and white, you should be good. So I think that's the right size. It's the right side. Black and white. Let's flip this over. Okay, you see those gradient colors? See, oranges, greens, blues. That tells me I'm on the incorrect side, so I need to flip it back. Okay, if we were going from positive to negative, we would cut our filter in this orientation, but we're going to a positive. So 90 degrees in either direction, left or right. So we're going to cut it like this, okay? But I'm not going to cut it to this size. I'm going to be cutting it to this size. So I'm going to put this film over it, take a Sharpie, and try to trace out that shape that I outlined to you earlier. Again, I'm drawing on one of the protective layers of the film, so this is going to be removed when we install this. And because this is going to be the back of the film, I want to make sure I know that, so I'm going to put a B here, so that way I know that that B is for the back. That way I don't confuse installing it this way. Okay, Now that I've traced that out, let's cover this back up and cut this out. Oh, one other thing you can do, because this is kind of like a circle, remember it has to be 90 degrees perfectly. So you can just draw, while we have these edges here for reference, you can just draw an arrow here and an arrow here. I put a little T here to tell me that this is for the top and then this is going to be for the side. Okay, let's clean this up a little bit more. And let's test fit this inside of our case to make sure it fits. I'm gonna use my air blaster here just to quickly clean off any dust that might be on there, so that way I don't transfer that inside the case. And there's where our arrows help for orientation. All right, if I didn't put that up arrow and side arrow, I would be unsure as to which way to put this in. So like that. Okay, now when we take a look here, we want to make sure that we are obviously covering all of our 4 windows, 1, 2, 3, and 4, but you also want to make sure that there is enough of it going beyond the windows so that we have room to put our double-sided tape, here, here, and here. I also want to make sure that this isn't too large where I'm having to squeeze it in because of that polarizing film bends. It's not going to look good when we reassemble. Other thing to note here, which I just found out, we have this little button here at the bottom, and that button is going to push on this inside part, which I'm assuming is going to push on the module for one of the functions, probably the backlight. So you can see here my film is covering where that button is being pushed, so I need to cut that out and leave some room. Okay, now we've got room here at the bottom, which is great. I would say maybe just a little bit cut more on the top and then this tiny angle here on the side. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. So now what we're going to do is cut out a strip of double-sided glue tape. I will put a link to my tutorial on how to do that in the description below. We're going to put some glue tape right here, and then one right here at the bottom, and then a couple here on each side. Okay, this is the tape that I'm using, double-sided glue tape with a protective white backing that gets removed prior to installation. T-Rex super glue tape. Again, you can get this in your grocery or hardware store. Okay, here's that glue tape. Now, when you're setting your tape, you want to keep it just maybe a millimeter or two away from the free edge. So here's the free edge of the bottom display, of the bottom window. You don't want to bring it too close here, because what happens is when you reassemble everything, the pressure from the contents is going to push on this tape, and the tape will end up spreading into the visible area, and it won't look good. So just keep it a few millimeters away from the free edge and give it room to expand. You can take a toothpick afterwards and spread it just like a millimeter or two to get it where you want it. And in this case, there's no protective backing because it came off when I was installing it. And there we go. So our tape is done for the bottom. Let's get one for the top now. And two small ones for the side. Okay. Now, if we were going to go with just a straight up positive display, meaning no colored filter, what I would do at this point is just take this part, install it in, and reassemble the watch. Now, we are going to be putting a colored filter, so the colored filter has to come before the polarizing film. So we now need to find a colored filter that is going to be the same shape as this. And so what I can do is just take cover this back up first. Take the polarizing film that I just cut and use it as a stencil for my colored filter. Now, to find the right color, it can be a little bit tough because the filters are usually sold in, really long sheets, and each one is about, $5 to $10, so a little bit expensive. So this is your first time modding and you don't really know what color to use. I recommend picking up one of these. This is called a Lee Filters Swatchbook. It can sometimes be found used off of eBay. If you contact Lee Filters, sometimes they ship them to you for free because their hope is you find a color that you want and then you order the full size from them using the name and the code of the color you want. So anyways, the beauty of this is that you get many, many colors, right? And it's very easy to cycle through them. You can put your, watch over it and really kind of simulate what your look is going to be before you commit to buying a big sheet. Now in this case for this customer, I was going to use chrome orange because it's usually the most popular, but it doesn't really quite match the orange of the lettering here. This is almost like an orange or like a pink salmon color. But he did have orange in his request, so this is the closest I could find. And again, I can always take it off because I always show it to the customer before I mail it out for approval. I can always take this off and use a different color. I think the exact color of this is more of like a pink against salmon, and I don't think that would look very good against the black case. So I think this half CT orange would probably look the best. So once you find the filter that you want, if you don't have a stencil like I do here on the left, you can just kind of put your watch case underneath the filter and trace it. In this case, we are going to put our polarizing film there. And trace this out. I'm going to use a Sharpie again. And I want to limit how much I'm touching the face of the filter because I don't want to get fingerprints on it. There we go. Now the parts out here are not going to be used, so I can grab it with my fingers there. Okay, there we go. Let's cut off a little bit more here. And let's stack it up there. So good, we have a good match for our polarizing film. We are going to check for fingerprints now, which I don't have any, but I do have a little bit of dust here, so I need to make sure to clean that with the air blaster. Before installing it, we're going to take our case now, make sure we're in the right orientation. Lift up. Okay. Check for any dust that you might have here on the inside of the case. You know, sometimes dust does get in there. And if you do, you can kind of turn the case upside down and then use your duster from the bottom. It sometimes also helps to have a black background while you're holding this, okay, to check for any dust. Okay, once you get that clean, take your filter, do the same, but do it away from your work area so you don't blow the dust onto the case. Okay, then we can go ahead and lay our filter down, making sure that we leave clearance there at the bottom for that button. Okay, and once you have the filter in place, go ahead and make sure you have good coverage of all the windows, and then you can start pushing down on the glue to secure that in. Okay, now that that's in, we need to do the same thing again with the glue tape, because now we are going to be gluing our polarizing film. So I'm going to cut ahead to that because it'll just save time on the video of me putting down the glue. Okay, so now we have some new glue tape in all four sides again. And we're going to give this a quick blast again. Check for any dust that might be there. Okay, then we're going to take our polarizing film. Okay, now once we peel off the protective backing, it's going to be hard to figure out what's top and bottom and back, so you just need to remember it right now and hold it in place. So again, you have a protective layer on the front and on the back. So let's remove the front first. Okay, so this is the front that we're removing, so we don't want to touch the back at this point with our fingers. Okay, we're going to leave the protective layer on the back still installed. On the front, I'm going to go ahead and dust that. Okay, lay this down using the arrows for orientation. Then secure it in place. And then finally we can remove the protective back layer. There we go. And the writing comes off. Okay, now that looks pretty good. So let's give this a quick dusting. And then let's put the case back on, and we're going to focus now on reassembling the module. Okay, we're going to start with this piece here and this piece as well. So the first thing we want to do is locate that circle at the bottom. That's going to be our 6 o'clock. And then we're going to insert this here. So I believe we are going to do the reverse for installation. So I'm going to insert the bottom 2 clips. So clip here and a clip here. The display is going underneath that first. And then it's resting on top of the top spring. So I have to find a way to push that down. Take a clean microfiber cloth here. And then I'm just going to pull back on this top spring and try to reinsert it in. Okay, that's having a hard time. Let's try it the opposite way. Going from the top first, and then the bottom. Okay, there we go. I think I got it. Up a little bit more on the bottom clip here. Okay. So it took a little bit of work, but I inserted the display first underneath the top spring and then pushed this way to collapse that spring and allow the bottom side to get underneath that clip and then that clip. And then you can just turn it to its side to verify that the clips are all on top of the display. And so that looks pretty good. Okay, now what we're going to do is install. So now we're working right to left using our parts. We're going to grab this part and this part. They are the exact same size. Some of these Casio watches have different lengths, but usually the cutout is length specific. So it doesn't really matter in this case. We're going to put one here at the top and one here at the bottom. So top here and then bottom here, you're going to insert them along their thin edge and then just lightly tap that down so it makes contact with the back of the display. I'm going to turn it to its side and just make sure it's sitting nice and flush. If this is not installed properly, the display usually doesn't show up properly either. Okay, and that looks good. All right, next we're going to take this part here. Make sure it's in this orientation with this fork-like contact facing you. And then remember that little Sharpie hole we had here on the right? We need to reinsert our spring into that. The spring looks like this. And you'll notice, I don't know if you can pick it up on camera, it's got this loose tail on one end and no tail on the other. The tail side is going to be going, or the non-tail side is going to be going into that hole first. So I'm going to grab it by the tail side and then insert it into there. Okay, so we'll insert our spring into that hole that we marked. And I believe, there it is coming out the back. I believe that's the spring that will interact with the speaker. Okay, once that's in place, we're going to take our circuit board next. You have this contact here, which should be meeting up with that contact there. Actually, let's insert this into the back here. We have this hole here and that hole here, and we can match it to the two posts that are here at the bottom, 1 and 2 in white. Okay, and then once that's there, we can turn this over and sandwich this back on top. And put our clips back in. Now, you are not going to see anything for now because the polarizing film is in the case, not on the module. So just make sure you have those clips all clipped in. Then we're going to do a hard reset. This is what you would do if you did a new battery change. So you're going to take a paper clip, bend it like so. You want to have one end slightly longer than the other. And the longer end is going to go into the hole called AC. So let's see if I can focus that for you. AC right there. So longer tip into there, and the other short end can touch anywhere that is metal. And I'm going to hold for 10 seconds. Okay, so that should be a hard reset for that. Then we're going to take our case back here and the rest of our parts. Open this up and again dust it. Check it for any dust. Take our module, same thing, dust that. We're going to insert our module in the proper orientation. One quick thing, on some watches, the inside here where the pushers go into the module, sometimes they like to stay pushed inside like this. So for example, when you push this button, you see right here, that little piece comes out. So on some watches, they don't spring back like this one and they stay pushing in, which makes it impossible to install the module. But just for good measure, give a light push outward on all of those parts to make sure that they are fully out. And then install your module. Okay, now what's going to happen here is as you push that module down, and I'm going to zoom in here for you, these thin metal contacts, 1, 2, 3, and 4, those pushers that I told you about that we were trying to push out, what happens is the metal contacts will sometimes hit. So if the metal contact is on my left finger, it'll hit on top of the pusher. And that's incorrect. The pusher needs to be behind it, so that way the pusher hits the metal contact and the metal contact hits the module on this side. So what you need to do is just take a tool here and just lightly pry backwards on each of those metal tabs as you're putting some pressure with one finger. And you'll feel that as you do that, the module will start to sit lower inside the case. And then you'll have proper function of your buttons. So now you can see right here, as I push the button, it hits that metal contact. You see that thin piece of metal? And then the metal contact hits the module, which is what you want. And this one too. There and there. And of course, we're going to check all these functions once the watch is completely reassembled, so that way the customer has a fully functional watch. We're next going to take our O-ring here. And I think we can move back to the plain surface because we have that raised bezel. So your O-ring needs to have a nice gloss. You see how it has a nice shine in the light. If it doesn't have that shine, it could be dry, and you want to just put a little bit of silicone oil there just to make sure that it's well lubricated, because this is one of the things that will ensure your water resistance rating. The little trough that this O-ring sits in, you want to check that also. Make sure that it is free of debris. And for this one, let's line up the 6 o'clock part of the O-ring first, because it has that asymmetric flat part, and that'll make it easier to line up everything else afterwards. And then just lightly push down along that ring. Okay, once that's in place, you're going to take this part here. You'll notice that on this side it has these little nubs sticking out in gray, and on this side you don't have that. You want the nubs facing you, and you want it in this orientation. And as you lay that down, the spring that we installed earlier will protrude out, and so will this little metal contact here, which is a good sign. Okay, that looks like it's in place. And we're going to take our case back, put it in this orientation. And now you want to put your case back perfectly lined up from the beginning. You don't want to put it down and then move it around to find the holes lining up, because as you move the case back around, you're going to roll that O-ring, and then it'll probably come off of its placement. So let's sit this here at the bottom, line up those two holes, and then push down. Oh, didn't get that. Let's check the O-ring again. There we go. Push down and then maintain pressure with one finger as you get the screws to reattach the case back. Okay, loosely secure the 4 screws. Okay, and then before you tighten, check the seam between the case back and the case. Make sure you don't have that O-ring being pinched. If it is, unscrew the case back and readjust it. Now we can fully tighten. Okay, let's grab our strap. Okay, now before we do the strap, let's go ahead and check our watch first, because if we have any problems with our work, we want to take care of that now before finishing it up. And there you go. Have that nice orange display, which I think, isn't quite 100% the match of that text that the customer's looking for, but I think this matches the orange that he sent me in the mock photo. So I think this looks really good. Great contrast, I think, with the matte gray finish of this case. So I do like that. Now I'm turning this in the light, and I want to check for any dust, fingerprints. I also want to check that the filter is fully covering all these openings, all these windows, so that way when I turn it to the side, I don't see any of the white or gray color display underneath. So that looks really good. Now let's check the functions of the watch. So we have the bottom left button, and now I can hear the sound. So the sound tells me that that spring that we installed is properly connected. Now let's go to another mode here where we can test the rest of the buttons. So here we have the timer, and let's push the bottom right. That's working. Let's stop that. Let's reset it here with the top right. Is that how you restart, or is it here at the bottom? Oh, sorry. So bottom right to start, bottom right to stop. Let's test the top left here. That's going to clear it. And then this one on the top right is for split time. So I'm not sure how to test for that. Let me see. Oh, I think split time, you have to start your timer. No, that's not working either. I think you have to go to your stopwatch for split time. There we go. Let's try this. There we go. Split time is working. So now we have all 4 buttons working. Now let's go ahead and test that backlight. So let's see if I can get it a little bit dark here. There we go. There's your backlight. So that is this button here at the bottom, the one we were making sure to avoid contact with the filters. And that's working well. So we have all 5 buttons of this watch working. So now that I know that, let's reset this. Make sure I don't have any timer or stopwatch functions running, because that will consume battery. Okay, good. And then we are on the home screen. Okay, now of course I'm going to set this time and the date to the customer's location. I will do that at the very end. Let's go ahead and just jump to the strap installation. Now with this one, what I like to do is take your spring bar, kind of pull it to one side, but not quite out all the way. So just enough where you have a little bit of an extension there. Put some pressure with one of your fingernails there, and then insert that into one of the holes. So that way one end is already inserted, and then the other one gently rest it on top of the lug. You don't want to push too hard because you'll scratch the plastic. take your spring bar tool, pry inward on that spring bar while simultaneously pushing down with this finger. Okay, once the spring bar sits down into the lug, it may not have found its hole yet, so you might have to take your spring bar tool, reposition, and kind of force it into that hole gently. Okay, once you think it's firmly in there, rotate around, go to the other spring bar and also push that more into its hole just to make sure it's fully in. Okay, and then you want to take your strap and your watch and you want to tug in opposite directions. You want to twist, okay, and then you want to pull towards you. And that's going to simulate all the stress that this strap will go through on your wrist. You know, if you're working out, if you're running, if you're lifting something, you don't want that spring bar popping out and sending the watch to the floor, you know, after you're doing all this work. You want to check it now and just kind of test it. Okay, I'm not pulling too hard, but I am pulling firmly, so that looks good. Also, make sure you know that the long part of the strap always goes to the 6 o'clock position, right? And the short strap with the buckle goes to the 12 o'clock. We're going to repeat the same for this side. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we've got 4 more. I think these are probably for the shroud to secure the case now, or the shroud, which is this gray part, to the actual case underneath. Okay, now even though I'm going to wipe down the front of this display, I'm making sure that I'm limiting how much my fingers are touching the display. I'm just touching the outside of that case, because remember, this has a raised bezel. Pretty surprised. First I'm working on this watch, and I told the customer that, and he was still comfortable with me working on this. But very surprised that this one was one of the easiest ones I've worked with in terms of removing that display and getting that glue off. This is one of the easiest. Okay, now fully tighten those last screws. And then we'll wipe off the glass. Okay, and let's take a look at our work. I think a very simple and pretty cool mod for this particular Casio. Let's do a wrist shot here. My cousin gave me this moon swatch, by the way. Very generous gift from him, especially in this rare Tiffany blue color. Just put it on this Gulf strap. Actually sending a bunch of straps to him and some other gifts as a thank you. Pretty cool watch, but let's get this GShock on the wrist. And give you guys a roll here. And that'll do it for today's mod, guys. So thank you for watching the video. I invite you to not only follow this channel, but also my Instagram. I have it in the description below, at watchNcarry. In there you'll find my other mods that I've done for myself and other customer watches. I usually post those as a Monday thing for Monday mods, and then some of my other EDC gear and watches. And that's also where I recommend you contact me by messaging me on Instagram if you have any questions or requests for me to do some mod work for you. But as always, guys, have fun. I really appreciate, by the way, Mark sending these in. You know, he sent me 6 Casios. I mean, that's definitely hundreds of dollars worth of Casios. He's doing that completely out of trust by just watching my YouTube and talking to me on Instagram. You know, I like to think I'm a pretty friendly guy, but at the end of the day, that's a lot of trust you guys are putting in me when you send me your products. And I really do appreciate that, and you know, hope that these videos can help some of you guys out. If not, give you some enjoyment watching your watch being modified by me. If you have any questions, please put them down below. Appreciate you guys sticking with it. And as always, have fun, and I will see you guys on the next one.